New year, same great radio. Welcome back to the Extra Podcast. My name's Daniel Markin. I'm joined around the table, Greg Harris.
Hey.
He's a regular on the show and returning from a little vacation, a little bit of Christmas holidays, a little bit of New Year's. Jeff Bucknam.
Hey, how are you?
We're great.
Why was there such an awkward silence after that? You can't respond with just kindness? It's good to see you, Daniel. It's good to see you, Greg.
It's good to see you, Jeffrey.
It's good to be seen, Greg.
It's good to see you, Greg. It's good to see you, Jeff.
Yeah, did you guys have a good time with the podcast in my absence? I bet you did.
Oh, we did. We had the Steve Weens, friend of the show, on the program, and man,
why? Greg
was it not an anointed?
Greg is sitting across from me right now, nodding like vigorously.
I answered a phone call from you during the podcast.
Yeah, we were going to try and get you on.
When you called me last week, I was trying to read the situation if I could invite you on the podcast. I decided not to.
Oh, yeah, it's probably a good idea. Because I think I was calling to rant.
Yeah, it was a bit of a rant, and I thought he might not be right for the podcast.
No.
He might not be in the headspace to be. I was looking forward to a guest on the phone.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Well, we were just talking about it too.
Yeah.
And then you called, and I'm pointing at the...
Here, Steve had this idea. Steve thinks that we should, like, once a month have like a Facebook Live, the podcast, and have people's comments direct the show.
Yeah, it's good.
So like reader or caller,
people power is what.
Yeah.
Give the people the power.
You want to do this?
We got to give the people what they want. This is the People's Podcast.
You bet. Let's do
Honestly,
that.
we could change the name to People's Podcast
next week. Let's do it next week.
Do you want to do it next week? I'm thinking episode 350.
Okay, you can do whatever you want.
Or we can do it next week.
No, 350 sounds good.
But 350, we have to do something special.
What time? When are we right now?
3:35.
Okay, so see you in 3 months. That's a great idea.
We can keep plugging it. We can keep plugging it.
Is that 15 weeks, 3 months?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a math genius.
I think it is. It's 3 or 4. Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever. It was the ballpark.
Yeah. No, ballpark. Yeah. Where's that saying come from, by the way?
In the ballpark.
It's in the ballpark.
No.
No, I mean it's from baseball, obviously, but like
probably like.
Can you give me a ballpark guess?
But
like, what does that mean?
I think it's probably... How many people do you think are here in the ballpark? 60,000?
There you go.
You think it's about like the whole... I was going to say, I think it's about the stadium, like the size of the stadium.
How many people are here today?
Yeah, you're guessing number. Oh, ballpark. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking more like you could be in a like playing the game. So
I was reading just as an aside of this. When somebody says when we are in a baseball stadium and you guys will look around and you say must be 35,000 people here or whatever. Do we claim that language is untruthful? And the answer is no. Of course we don't claim that that's untruthful. We think that that's true. But yet that's the way people did numbers in the ancient world. They ballparked them. Right? So what ends up happening is a lot of people claim the Bible has all sorts of errors in it because their numbers
5,000 men
are round. Yeah, they end up saying, there's 5,000 men.
No, there was 7 or 5. There was 5,123 men.
Do you understand? Greg? Like, so we end up applying modern, kind of scientific rules to the speech that happens in the Bible when we don't even apply that to our own speech.
Like when I say it's like 3 months away.
Yeah, when you say...
you get all mad at me.
Right, I do. That's right. Because we have more of a literalistic, exacting kind of idea regarding numbers and things like that than they did.
Or clearly...
So for those of you who come across things in the Bible, say, well, there's, this many thousands fought this many thousands. They're ballparked numbers. That's what they are. But that doesn't mean that they're not true. They're true numbers. Insofar as the people intend them. They intend them to be ballparked because that's how people did numbers in those days. Doesn't mean that we're better than they are because people do this all the time now, right? And I even use the phrase all the time. That's an exaggeration. It's not all the time, right?
But don't you think that nowadays we think that we're smarter than they were?
Of course we do. That's why we pass judgment on it. And anyway, I've been reading in the last little while. We have a leadership meeting this weekend at the church, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the Bible. And I've been reading a little bit about how some arguments regarding what's called inerrancy, which is a term I don't really care whether you use or don't use. It means is the Bible fully trustworthy on all it affirms? And it's interesting the arguments that people make are usually formed around people's modern worldview. So if I have a modern scientific worldview, I'm going to ask the Bible a bunch of questions. The Bible then will fall short, at least in my understanding of things, right? When the problem actually is not the Bible. I'm not treating the Bible on its own terms. I'm assuming my scientific worldview is the only true worldview, the only way you can look at things, right? So how language should be understood is according to my scientific worldview. In fact, there was a guy named Vern Poythress who wrote a book called Inerrancy and Worldview that argues this very point.
Okay, but if the Bible's divinely inspired, why doesn't the Holy Spirit just guide us to give the actual right number?
Well, what do you mean by right number?
The exact number. That's what we want to...
But that's my point, though, is that you're using modern definitions of right to speak about that. And I'm suggesting that actually those modern definitions of right are modern. They're not necessarily right or wrong. They are right. If I said there are, 61,376 people at the Seahawks game, right? Because I have records on my computer of paid attendance. By the way, which is probably, is that true?
No.
It's true that there are paid attendance, but it's not the number that are actually there.
Right.
You have no way of knowing the actual. So you're giving me the number that is paid, or that you registered at your gates, or something to that effect, right? But we treat that as more truthful because we can scientifically verify it on some level. Whereas ballpark numbers are not as truthful. But that's not true. They are truthful. They are. If the author intends them to be ballparked and understood as ballpark numbers, right? That's my point. Is that in the Bible, you have to understand what the author intends. It's not how you feel about it. It's what is the author intending to convey.
Do we ever see it exaggerated, the numbers?
You bet. All the time, man.
So I'm thinking with Saul has killed his thousands and David his tens of thousands.
Yeah.
What's that implying?
It means that David killed a lot more guys than Saul did. He was a better warrior. He was supposedly a better leader of God's forces than Saul was. And therefore, in those days where, someone's military prowess said something about their ability to lead the nation, the assumption is that David is a better leader than Saul. He's more successful than Saul, and that's why Saul got mad. But for you to then zero in on the 10, well, David probably didn't kill 10,000s, and you're going to do some research now to try to prove that, well, they didn't, if they fought these 4 wars and this number of people were in each war in this region, and he wasn't 10,000.
What about the...
I'm saying that that's not the intent of the author in that place, and we are holding the Bible to a standard that the Bible itself is not intending to be held to. It's not like the ancient authors wrote in a certain way. That's not untruthful.
Right. So isn't there, I don't know the exact details, isn't there a bit of a controversy about how many Israelites left Egypt?
Yeah.
It would have been like millions or something if we use the actual math provided.
You've got ballparked numbers in these cases, which are truthful if you're ballparking them.
So how is that conversation just about numbers then? Because Daniel, before we started the radio program that we have going on right now.
The one we're talking on right now.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
There was a question that someone asked about Adam and Eve.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Here we go.
So how... I'm
giving you
a segue.
Well, here's the question, yeah. Are Adam and Eve real people? Or are they just literary devices that... Because if you look at other creation stories in different religions, there's kind of similar figures. There's trees and there's fruit of good and evil and knowledge and whatnot. So are they literary figures? Or is Adam and Eve just... We're referencing... Any man and any woman could have been Adam and Eve in this story.
How would Jesus have answered that question? Radio's not great with dead air. You know that.
I thought it was rhetorical. I thought you were about to keep talking.
Jim Rome disagrees.
What?
Jesus referred to Adam as a real dude.
Yep. Yeah, he did. On several occasions. Yeah, especially when he's talking about marriage and divorce. He's being confronted by the Pharisees about their kind of an inner room squabble between the Pharisees over what they believe when divorces are allowed or not. And Jesus references the creation account in a very literal fashion.
So why is it?
He doesn't treat it just as a story with that's metaphorical or anything like that. So I'm saying that if you went to Jesus and the evidence that we have in the New Testament from Jesus and the apostles there, they treated Adam and Eve as real people. I don't also see any reason why, literarily, as you read Genesis, why you would come to a conclusion, literarily, that they are treated any different than Abram or Joseph. Now, I have a friend who I had a good long debate at the Evangelical Theological Society this year, who raises some interesting questions about all that, and I'm not in any way suggesting there isn't nuance or discussion to be had regarding some of the scientific problems that currently exist, especially things that are being raised by some scientists who do DNA studies, saying that it's not possible for the breadth of human DNA that exists today to shrink down to an original 2. It has to be at least 10,000 people at one time. So
is that kind of what John Walton talks about?
Yeah,
he did a book where
I haven't read John Walton's stuff. I know that there are guys locally who hold that. Some guys at Trinity Western hold that viewpoint, and several others. I think I've said on this podcast before. I'm willing to hear their viewpoints openly, but I also think that we should probably wait to make some big judgments about this and change our understanding of the history. How the church has understood these things over its history, until such time as the science has been able to be kind of supported over and over again for a number of years. Like, in other words, the Bible's been around for 2,000 years, and there's been so many scientific inquiries and questions that have been raised about it. And the Bible, in my view, has been able to answer those all at some level or another. Some of those have changed and nuanced our understanding of some things in the Bible. I think that's really helpful. But I before we, 4 years or 5 years or 10 years, even after somebody comes up with some scientific discovery, let's recognize that science changes quite frequently, and the scientific consensus changes very quickly these days. So let's wait to make judgments about whether or not we think that the science holds sway over what we think the scriptures say in this case. I think that when all facts are known, science and the Bible are friends, and will not contradict one another when all the facts are known. I just don't think that all the facts are known at the point. That's my view currently, but that's scientifically we're talking. If we're speaking literarily, I just don't see any reason why you'd read the first chapters of Genesis as conveying that Adam and Eve aren't real.
Right. Real in the... So this is where I'm trying to bridge the conversation we just had about
real
ballparking numbers and intent with this conversation. When
I say real, I mean flesh and blood living people. Although the argument isn't that they aren't flesh and blood living people. There's a lot of people who would say, well, they're not. They are flesh and blood living people. It's just that they were 2 of 10,000. Okay, so that's one of the viewpoints that's held within kind of the Christian church at this present time.
And they were kind of, just as God appoints priests or the high priest to take care of the temple, their job was to take care of the garden.
Yeah, so that's a debate. What I'm saying, that I have viewpoints on, but what I'm saying is to read the Bible and now say, well, they're just metaphor. It's just metaphor. Or they're just symbols for things. No, I can't see how that's the case. I can't. At this, I can. Maybe you guys can.
So
I think the author's intent is that they're real.
Right. Yeah. So the question I'm kind of asking, or trying to ask, if I can spit it out, is the historical context viewpoint of it. Are we asking a different question of are they real than what first century people would have been asking? So I'm with you that they were actually real people, but what I'm asking is, are we bringing too much of a 21st century modern view of how we define things and just importing it on the first century?
Like real?
Right. So this is me trying to bridge the conversations. If the intent in the numbers is to be truthful but not specifically accurate, why can we not bring that same kind of language when it comes to the point? The intent of the author was to talk about how things came to be and how these two characters played a central role in that. And Jesus is referring to that story is in the same kind of more ancient than modern mindset.
Yeah, that's very possible, and I think that's the argument that people
is that what it's based on, essentially?
Like Walton and others are making. I will say that the way that people retold stories in the ancient world is different than what we do. I mean, all the evidence that we have is that somebody would believe that a story was true if it contained, a kind of a core of 40 to 60% of what actually happened. Do you understand what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then different versions would exaggerate different parts of the story, which, by the way, is kind of exactly how oral culture today works. Like if you retell a story, Greg, and you retell it, I don't know, 8 different times, or maybe you tell a story and the 3 of us obviously are in this room. You know the story already, and we tell the story again. We're not going to get all the details the same as what you got. You'll emphasize different pieces than I will when I tell it to my wife later. But largely, I might exaggerate some things or talk about your facial features, or I wasn't there, so revisit different parts of it and color it up a little bit. That doesn't mean that the story that I'm telling is untrue, right? So my wife can't accuse me, you're lying, right? Or that Greg, because he tells the story right now and then tells it later and includes a few more other details, or exaggerates maybe one part, the fish wasn't just 5 inches long, it was 12 inches. You're not a liar because of this. What you're saying is not untrue. So this is the way that stories work. And so, for example, I mean, if you go to seminary, one of the things that you'll find is that there are so many different versions of the David and Goliath story. So many. It's like, I don't know, 15, 20 versions of it. So which one is the right one? Well, and doesn't this call into question the truthfulness of the scriptures? No, it doesn't call into question the truthfulness of the scriptures. What it shows you is that this is the way oral cultures work. Even our oral culture works that way. And I don't think that we're quite as aware these days, by the way, of how much Google and the internet has actually changed our understanding of truthfulness and things like. Do you understand what I mean? Mm-hmm. And how now you can fact check everything and assume that the version of a story that's told online is the true version. We even have websites that try to do this, Snopes and others, that's the true version online, as opposed to, but historically, oral culture has always worked in kind of a fluid fashion, right? So there's a TV show. I don't know if you guys have. I am not recommending this show necessarily to you. Okay.
All right, guys. Everyone listen up. Jeff's about to recommend this show.
I'm not recommending this show, but it is the most prophetic television show about our technological times of any out there. It's called Black Mirror, and Netflix does it. Have you seen it?
I've seen a few. I've seen 1, maybe 2.
They are they are very, like I said, prophetic. They sometimes deal in areas that are ugly and questionable, and that's on purpose. They are trying to show, because we're so excited about all our new technologies, like our telephone and stuff like that, our cell phones and our
social media platforms,
social media, and all that kind of stuff. Because we're so excited about these things and only tend to look at the positive side. What this show is basically doing, saying, "Oh, well, here's what could happen if we adopt this thing and keep going down this path, and without any kind of questions about it."
Which it's a unique show because for like a Hollywood TV show, they take a real kind of conservative bias as what this is going to look really bad in the future. And they seem like, we were talking about this in the staff room with Andy, and he's saying, whether they know it or not, this show is promoting the Judeo-Christian worldview.
Without a doubt, it's every show raises questions about the sinfulness of human people. Mm-hmm. That look, we are prone to use our tools in ways that are just that are sinful because we're sinful.
Yeah. And it's not that the technology is bad,
right?
But it's that we end up using it for bad things. And it allows us to maybe slip into that faster and do it more efficiently. Mm.
Anyway, there's a reason I brought this up, because the show has this, one of the shows is of the ability that doesn't seem outrageous for us to be able to record everything we see. Oh. Mm. So you have a little chip below your ear, and you you're able to both replay it in your own eye or broadcast it onto a TV. So if Greg, you asked me, hey, what'd you do in Los Angeles, which is where I was last week? Oh, I could show you the stuff my son and I did. I could just flip it onto the screen and I could replay and fast play and freeze it and say, hey, see that, see that, see that. You'd see it actually through my eyes. The show is basically trying to say, though, that creates all sorts of problems, though, regarding, that if you and I get in a debate or argument about something, Greg, then and I'm recounting a story, I don't need to recount the story anymore. I can just replay it. Right?
Oh, instead of that you said this,
you can say this. No, he said, she said. It's all, and there's some really important points being made about technology in that show. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because that's the kind of levels of scientific, truthful accuracy that we are coming to in a technological age expect of people. That if you deviate at all in your retelling of an event from the actual things that took place in the actual moments, what he said, she said, whatever, exact wording, you're treated in some cases like a liar. And I'm saying that standard is unequivocally modern and really unrealistic to express upon any culture, even existing cultures today that don't really have a lot of writing or internet use or whatever, and certainly on the Bible. So what you have in the New Testament, for example, is like mostly quoted speech of Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. So did Jesus actually say those words? Well, yeah. But those exact words and that we could replay in history and play back on our little eye picture thing and flick them up on the screen, probably not. Mm-hmm. It's the recounting of what Jesus said through the prism of the Spirit-inspired author who wants to emphasize certain aspects of what he said and didn't. So is the Sermon on the Mount exactly what Jesus said? Or is it Matthew recounting what Jesus said with some of Matthew's theological agendas thrown in, which, by the way, those theological agendas are Spirit-inspired, right? So it's not like God is, leaving Matthew out on a lone beach and he's got to figure it out. No, he's carried him along that's the way the Bible talks about its own inspiration.
Yeah, isn't Luke really for the four Gospels, they all take it differently, right? Luke is talking about a lot of the healings. John is dealing with the Gnostics. What do you say Matthew and Mark deal with? Like the kind of the emphasis.
Well, Mark is about Jesus' kingship, I think. I've been reading through Mark, actually, at the beginning of this year, and it's really telling how much the authority of Jesus is emphasized in Mark's gospel over everything, right? Spirits and demons and, weather and like everything. And the assumption is even people should do this. Sickness kneels to him. Everything kneels to him.
Mm-hmm. Matthew's probably got a little bit more of a engaging with a Jewish audience in particular, trying to persuade people who are familiar with the Jewish story, familiar with Israel's history, trying to persuade them that he is this Messiah. So some of his work with genealogies and other.
And people get frustrated because there's, when you do a harmonization of the Gospels, they find some different versions between, the same story is told in different ways from three authors. Oh, he emphasizes that. And so I emphasize that.
And which one's true?
People will end up using that word. Well, which one is true or not? And that's the response to that question is, what do you mean by true? Mm-hmm. Do you mean can we replay and be the exact words of Jesus? Because the answer to that is probably none. If that's the standard of truth that you think is normal and real, that's not the standard of truth that we use in our normal everyday speech all the time. Use ancient standards to apply to an ancient book, right?
Right.
To not do so is what we call anachronistic. It's out of time.
So here's my question: when Cain kills Abel, right? I always mix that up. Cain kills Abel?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
you don't know that, Pastor.
I always forget that one.
That might be one of the questions that God asks.
Okay.
Like when you get to have and he asks you questions, that might be it.
I'm going to freeze up.
You'd be like,
it's going to be awful. It's going to be really embarrassing. So Cain gets all nervous about who he's going to see when he gets kicked out.
Yeah.
We were reading that in our
Yeah.
Bible plan a few weeks ago or whatever, and I read that passage again. And I thought that's an interesting little detail that's thrown in there. This is early in Genesis, where the question I always ask when I read that part, it's highlighted in my Bible.
Where'd they all come from?
Who are those people? Who's he afraid of?
Totally.
Like his siblings?
And this is where people who are arguing that Adam and Eve were two of 10,000 hominids are saying, see, this answers this historic question for us. Piece of cake. And yeah, maybe it does. And that is one place where it would be able to answer that. The answer to the question is, I don't know.
Right.
We don't know. The Bible is also a highlight reel, right? It doesn't give us every single thing that happened on the face of the earth at all times. So we're only left with what we have in the scriptures.
Yeah. And isn't that interesting? Because every culture is gonna ask different questions of the Bible that the Bible doesn't intend to answer, right?
Yeah.
Different backgrounds, different interests, different ways we're wired, different eras we live in. We're going to ask the Bible different questions that, like you say, the Bible doesn't actually provide an answer to the who's Cain afraid of.
Yeah. Well, this is what's happening even in modern teaching with people. Like when you take the Bible out of its context, that's essentially what you're doing. Is you're making the Bible speak to an issue that it's not intending to speak to at that point. Right. Which is why you end up finding lots and lots of people. I mean, Daniel, one of the next questions that we were going to deal with was people who are walking around these days and saying that they quote Bible verses to say that we need to decree and declare things over.
Yeah, I mean
stuff, and that's just a way. Before you ask the question or get into it, that's just the passages of scripture that they use to try to say this are all taken out of their context. And what they essentially are doing is saying, how do we have in the modern world where we feel so out of control? How do we exert some level of control over our world? Oh, I know. We'll speak things out into the universe and make it so that they come true, right? Mm-hmm. That our words have power. So then they read that assumption into the Bible. Ooh, and then they come up with doctrines or come up with theological approaches that might prove that. Like, point one, God has authority to speak worlds into existence, right? Jesus can calm the storm. So God himself. Point two, we are made in the image of God, right? Therefore,
we have that ability.
We have the ability to speak things into existence like God did the worlds and like Jesus did with the storm.
Yeah. So the root behind why I was asking
That's not true, by the way. I'm fearful that people are hearing me.
Jeff is not recommending
I'm not
this.
saying that that's the case.
Yeah.
I'm saying that that's the way people argue in order to make it the case.
Yeah. The reason I was bringing it up is because I follow a lot of various pastors and kind of celebrity pastors and whatnot on Instagram, and I've seen a lot of people declare this year is going to be your year.
Why do you
God's
really?
for you.
You follow?
Yeah, I'm always curious to see what they're saying.
Greg
what
Harris,
they do.
one of the celebrity pastors.
Greg's
that you
not
follow
on. I would.
Instagram?
I follow him on Twitter.
Greg, are you really prolific on Twitter?
He's a sports guy. Greg's a sports Twitter guy. But back to my
prolific tweeter.
Tell you what, if I tweet something, will you retweet it?
Can you change your Twitter profile pic from an egg?
Then I'll tweet about your retweet.
The red egg.
The red
egg. And then you'll
go
back and forth.
I'm going to That's one of my favorite things on Twitter is the Christian leader who retweets his own tweet. That's great. My tweet wasn't enough. Sorry. Daniel, you had a point.
My point was
you were gramming. You were over there gramming away.
I was gramming and I was storying and I keep seeing people saying, declare this. Like I declare this year a year that you're going to be free from your anxiety. I declare this year is the year that you're going to be this and that God is going to be moving in your life in this particular way. And I don't know. I have a hard time with that language because I've never felt like I have that authority. Do I have that authority, Greg? Because I'm one of God's. I'm one of his children. And so I can kind of say with confidence that God can move and do these things. And so I'm calling him to do it. Is that just language they're using that's forceful and emotional? Or did they actually believe that they can change it with their words?
Yeah, I don't know what each one of them were intending. So I think it's realistic to say that in some of those cases, they're using hyperbolic language to say things that we would say like, I hope this year goes well for you. And instead of saying, I hope it, I'm going to say, I declare it. Okay. Maybe.
Okay. No, what?
But I think
you're so
a lot
charitable.
of them, I think a lot of them actually believe that if you don't actually say something like that, if you don't actually throw those words out there and actually declare something, that it won't actualize. Because mostly, I think, because it's something I brought up in my sermon a few weeks ago. Like, I just don't think we have a very good
Everything
grasp
basically
of
comes
God's
back
providence.
to stuff you brought up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Got to make
Or
it
you,
about me.
already said
do
it.
not have because you do not ask. And so this is me asking and declaring it.
Right. Well, yeah. So my point was we don't trust God's providence in our lives. And so we feel like if we don't make these declarative things to be true about us, then we don't know which way our life is going to actually end up going. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I think people, it's a bit of a syncretistic, it's a bit of a melding of different religious perspectives. You take kind of some Christian worldview stuff, you take some pop, the moral therapeutic deism stuff, you take a whole bunch of different spiritual stuff, and
it's animistic.
You bring together this hobbled together, Jesus will save you. In the meantime, your life can be great. Declare it over your life. Your words have power.
It's about control.
Yeah.
This is what you're trying to say about God's providence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we can say this, but then I've had experiences where it has come true. So I
Have
played
you had
on this football.
experiences where it hasn't?
Oh, totally. But then what about the times where it does? So do I just keep doing it because, you know what, maybe 50% of the time it's going to work?
I imagine that if I said that if I do this special dance outside of a store where I'm collecting money for the Salvation Army, that in the next minute after that, someone will give me money. I imagine if I do that there will be a percentage sometimes that's like 60% of the time it'll work, right? And on that basis, do I then say that there is a causal link between my dancing and their giving? See, so when I was a kid, funny story, we had to sell these chocolate bars. You guys ever do this for your baseball team and stuff? You sell chocolate bars?
It's the chocolate almonds.
Okay, so
or the Girl Guide cookies. That's the big one here. Is Girl Guides. They come around and we always buy them.
We used to sell these bars outside of a grocery store in Issaquah, Washington, just outside of Seattle. And this guy came up to us. We were going to win. I think you won a little stereo or something if you got first place or whatever.
Yeah, boombox.
So we were going to get a stereo, me and my friend. And this guy comes up to us outside this while we're selling this. And he said, here's this little card. And he said, if you say this line on this card each time before you try to sell the thing, it'll work. Of course, I'm like, what are we at that? I'm at that point. I'm like 10. I'm like, this is awesome.
But you want that radio.
We'll give it a try.
And you want that radio.
So we started doing it. And we started to genuinely feel, anyway, like the success rate was much higher. I don't know if it was or wasn't, but every time we sold one, we ended up saying to ourselves, that's because we said the line. See? Whereas before, when we weren't saying the line and we sold stuff, there wasn't any causal link to it. So my point is, it's very easy for us to make causal links where there may or may not be one.
Isn't this just superstition?
Yes, but this is my point, though, is you're being way too charitable at this, Greg.
What do you mean?
I'm on your case. Well, for you to say that, nobody says that. Nobody says I decree and declare something in the same way that they say, I hope this happens.
I was saying someone could.
I
don't know.
The reason that people say I decree and declare is because there's a theology behind it. And the theology is that I want to control my world. And there is a way to control my world that the Bible gives me. Right? So it is syncretism in the sense that it's the same kind of practice that somebody has when they go to the witch doctor. If I go to the witch doctor, I want him to do a spell that will give me what I want. So this is just another spell, right? Just because we say it and we don't say rinka maninka dinka rinka, open sesame or whatever, just because it says I decree and declare and then you make your statement, doesn't mean it's any less witch doctory.
Yeah, that's true. So here was my point was, I think some people are more aware of what they're actually doing, and other people see others doing it and they repeat the same kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So one, I think, is out of more ignorance than not. Both syncretism. It's just one's actually the propagator of it intentionally, and the other one's just
the solution to the problem is what you said. It's a trust in God's providence. there's something I'm planning on saying repeatedly this year that Kyle was talking to me about over Christmas. He sent me an article that was anyway a part of what Calvin talked about in the Christian life. And Calvin made the distinction of what Kyle called the apostrophe. And here it is. We are gods or we are gods. And by that, he meant one of those gods has an apostrophe in it. So either we are gods in the sense that we belong to God. We are under his authority and we take from him what it is he gives. Doesn't mean we don't ask for things. Doesn't mean, but we trust like a child trusts their father that when the answer is no or different or something, we trust that he's the kind of father who loves us and seeks our eternal good, right? Which is what you preached about. Or we say instead we're gods. Instead of saying we're gods with apostrophe, we're gods. Like the Tower of Babel kind, where we say, no, we're going to do our own thing here. We're going to solve all the problems. We want what we want.
That's the humanist view, right?
And
We create the own destiny. Like we're the future. We create that destiny.
So one of those is Christian. Christians love apostrophes. Okay, so if we are gods, meaning that we belong to him and we submit to his authority, we ought not be the kind of people who say that we're going to express some sort of dominion or power over something where God didn't speak, right? I want this car, so I'm going to decree and declare that it belongs to me. What? Why don't you ask the Lord for the car then and be at peace with what he gives? You can plead with God for it. If he thinks that this is ultimately going to be for your eternal good and his eternal glory, then you will receive the car. But at the end, the position you're in as a Christian is, I'm going to be at peace with what my daddy's going to give. As opposed to being somebody who says, no, God gave us these instructions so that we can manipulate the spiritual realms around us so that we can get whatever we want, especially money, which is usually why people decree and declare. We are gods or we are gods.
That's a good line.
Isn't it great? I love it. I'm going to say it all over the place. I've already planning my next year's Christmas stuff.
Nice.
I'm including that.
Look at that.
Love it.
Friends, that's just a little behind the scenes look of what goes on here at the Extra Podcast and at Northview. We're always thinking ahead.
Hey, can I ask a question? You're wanting to wrap up, aren't you?
Oh, I want to wrap up, but you get one more question.
I just want to know what your guys is like, your best example of current superstitions you still have, even though you think it's dumb.
Oh,
That I have?
Yeah. Here's
What?
mine.
Oh, yeah?
When my son has
sports?
when my son has a bad sleep, I tell my wife we're not allowed to put him in those pajamas again.
Wow. There's a period in my life, though, where I actually talk about syncretism, where I believe that whatever clothes I wore on a particular day gave me either a good day or a bad day. And I remember standing over my clothes drawer asking God, would you just tell me which ones are the lucky ones?
Yeah.
So just think about that. Oh, God, I need to know which are the lucky ones.
Because if you wear the wrong
I was
socks,
I was so mad at him that
Were you?
sometimes, because I was like, as a young guy, I was like 13, 14 years old. I was like, God, what? Just tell me which it is. Which is, anyway, pure syncretism. But I don't do I do that anymore? Sometimes I believe by checking a certain app on my phone, it will influence my sports teams.
Really?
Sports is,
Yeah.
Like-
See, sports and now for me, parenting.
Because you have no
Parenting is a sport.
You
Let's
have
be
no
real.
control over it, right? You have no control over it. So if I want my sport team to win, I know that I shouldn't check the score app because whenever I check the score app, they lose.
Yeah.
But if I check this other app, and so sometimes I will go like have to do 2 clicks instead of 1 to find the score, just so that I don't spread that juju out to them.
Yeah. This past season, every Whitecaps game I watched, they lost. And then every time I didn't watch it, they won.
So you don't.
And so I told Sarah, I can't watch. I want to watch
It's
the
the
game, but
Seahawks.
I don't want them to watch. I don't want to watch the game.
And then I realized the reason I didn't want to watch the Seahawks is because they made me so angry. And then I realized, it's probably good for me not to watch them. And then I watched them and they lost. So,
This has been a pretty cathartic episode.
but don't you see that my point is that, Daniel, that you can see how like we tend to reinforce these things by kind of the regular occurrence or our perceived regular occurrence of them.
Greg, I don't have any superstitions. I hit my head really hard and I forget pretty much everything.
All of them.
We are gods or we are gods. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.